I'm having trouble reading fiction because I struggle at visualizing characters. Hello. Welcome to I Love Reading, a channel about interesting book-related subreddit topics. If you love our content, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. As a token for appreciation, there is a sign-up link below to Audible, which offers the widest range of audiobook selection. There, you get to choose any audiobook and 2 other Audible originals of your choice from a collection of more than 200,000 audiobooks. Completely for free. Now let's get started. I have to visualize when I'm reading. Being able to connect some kind of image to the words helps me understand what's going on and makes it feel so much more real. However, I've always had a problem visualizing characters, specifically their faces. I don't have as much trouble with picturing the rest of their body, but trying to come up with a face for them is incredibly frustrating for me and ends up distracting me from the rest of the book. Has anybody had a similar experience? Any solutions? Some people are better at visualizing than others. My fiancée says reading is like watching a movie for her. Meanwhile, I don't visualize at all when reading, but I still love reading. The idea of putting a face on a character is completely alien to me. I wouldn't even know how to do it in my mind. I can't help you with possible solutions, but if you really want to put a face on the characters, you probably could Google drawings or actors who portrayed the character to reference the text with. Yeah, characters always have blurry faces for me too. Sometimes some characteristics stand out if they're important or mentioned a lot, but otherwise, they're all the same variation of an average indistinct face. But it doesn't really bother me. Same here. If there's something distinctive in the description like a beard, hat, eye patch, unusual hair color, I latch onto those, but otherwise, I have more of an impression than a strong visual. It's why I'm not so concerned with how an actor looks in an adaptation as much as I am about how they act the part. Unless they go wildly different. I understand that. I have aphantasia, so I don't visualize books at all. But I am a voracious reader. No way is right or wrong, just different. This is tough for me too. Based on character descriptions, I'll try to find an actor or a familiar face to portray them in my mind. I watch a lot of film and know a lot of actors' faces. So I choose an actor that comes close to the visual description of the character and visualize them that way. Gives the character a voice as well. I can't even visualize the faces and facial features of the people closest to me, so doing this, or even the need to, while reading is well beyond my comprehension. If I were to tell the sketch artist who works for the cops to draw my wife, nobody would ever find her. Might find someone else though. I never cared about visualizing books' characters' faces. First of all, not that many writers are good enough to give a description that sticks, anything more complex or original than 1 or 2 traits to distinguish such character, or some stereotypes like red-haired girl, stern-looking man, boy with the bright eyes. Second, usually, these descriptions are just 1 or 2 rows when such character appears and are never mentioned anymore. Third, I'm just bad at visualizing from a description anyway, so I don't even bother trying. The kind of blurry image I have is just based on the character's personality. Same here. I use the few distinguishing details given and just have general impressions of the characters in my head. Their personalities and demeanors stick out more to me than the specific faces. It's all good as long as I know who's doing what in the scene. I have this problem, but I don't really mind. I just have an image of that person in my head. It sometimes directly contradicts the written description, but I don't think that matters. It's relatively uncommon for someone's appearance to actually be important in a book. For example, sometimes a writer will use some description of a character's physical appearance to guide the reader to an indicator of their personality. He was thin and wiry, with a rat-like face, will most likely lead you to assume the character is untrustworthy. His appearance doesn't actually matter. You've taken the hint that he's untrustworthy and can imagine him however you like. A good book will let you fill in the blanks. Personally, I hate when I open a book and the first page is discussing how the protagonist looks down to his pores. I would write down the physical descriptors listed in the book describing the character and then go into Google and find a picture of someone who matches the description close enough for you to be satisfied. Get good enough and maybe one day you can turn it into a casting career. Obligatory reference to aphantasia here. I have the same trouble and it can be distracting. No solution from me as yet. But there are some aphantasia hacks on YouTube and Google that might help. Cheers, Jay-Z. Here's my technique. I am blind, and so for settings, I start with a place I am familiar with and work up from there. Building it the way the novel has it described. Likewise with characters, I try to get the voice precisely right, first the narrative voice of the book itself, and then each individual characters. Don't worry, it happens a lot. Many times an author won't do a great job at describing their character in full, other than their height and hair. Sometimes I just fill in characters with cookie-cutter facial features for visualization. If the author doesn't give you a descriptive profile for their character, it's safe to just come up with a basic face in your mind. It's not about the author not doing a great job, it's just a different way of writing. Jane Austen doesn't describe what Elizabeth Bennet looks like, but every reader has their own impression of her. I'm also pretty bad at visualizing things. Be it a person that's described, a room or a scenery. I just cannot imagine it in my head. Then again, I'm reading, not watching a movie. Shit. I learned something today. I really believed everybody who read saw what they read, or heard it, touched it, or felt it. If nothing emerges from my perception, I don't understand anything. Words mean absolutely nothing for me when deprived of their representation. I swear I tried to read without imagining it, but it is like reading Sanskrit when you know the alphabet, but not the vocabulary. I guess there is a correlation with mathematical reasoning, since I take a lot of time understanding the forms and shapes behind an equation, which is why I was below average in high school. Oh, you might say? I bet he's a slow reader. And you know what? Well, yes, I am. Sometimes I can take up to 5 minutes for a page because I have to create the scenery in my head, and when the writing is poor, well, I have to create it from scratch. I have to feel the misery, the pain or the ecstasy of the character, even though it is biased by my subjectivity. Here are my tips. When the writer omits a trait or is a poor descriptist, create. In this case, choose pertinent characteristics over light characteristics. Pertinence, for me, refers to how strong the trait of the character, e.g., the nose, can be retrieved depending on factors such as which species of this trait marked you in your experience, what could be suited for a character such as the one mentioned in the book. Another alternative, let the trait come by itself. Have as a locus of attention your character. Make him walk, speak, dance. The nose will come when it must. Relax, it is okay to omit some characteristics. Is it a secondary character, a tertiary one, a bystander? Sometimes, I see medieval guards as blurry pillars. I don't have it to discriminate between them, I have other priorities. Don't give up, man, really don't. My ex-girlfriend used to finish a 300 pages book within a week, while I struggled with it for 4 weeks. Do I care? Well, a little bit because some Greek tragedies are awaiting, but it has always been worth it in my experience. It greatly enhanced, correlational, not causational, take it with a grain of salt, my imagination abilities, my writing abilities, my mindfulness, and my artistic creation. Start with some illustrated novels. Great illustrated classics, Usber classics, etc. It will be like a warm-up for your visualization. Now read the same novel without illustrations. Try recalling those illustrations. Do it a few times, and probably eventually you will be ready to deal with any novel. Or while reading imagines the characters are from other sources. That source can be a movie or TV show or an advertisement. I have the same problem. I can't see characters' faces unless I have a visual reference like an illustrated book cover or a movie adaptation, and I only really picture their forms. However, scenery comes through the most for me, and oftentimes I can reread a scene in a book I read a while ago and still conjure up the same setting. I don't find that not being able to picture faces really detracts from my enjoyment of most books, so it may be something you get used to. I can say that I remember traits about characters while I'm reading, like one being known for her bright red hair or another for his very short stature, but it still doesn't really help me conjure up a face, and I find that remembering the traits that the author wanted you to remember is usually enough. I mean, for me, it's not really a conscious choice, but more of just how my brain works, but I'll always visualize a character in a book as looking like a character or person I know the appearance of. Like in the story I'm writing, the main character just looks like Trevor Belmont from the Castlevania anime. Like when I'm writing a scene, I'm basically picturing Trevor Belmont doing it. Or in what I'm reading now, The Tower of the Swallow, Visagoda is just vermin supreme in my mind. Complete with the boot hat. I couldn't tell you why, but this doesn't really subvert his gravitas in my mind. Whenever a character is introduced, I visualize them very roughly based on the description in the book, or just visualize them as somebody completely different. I don't do it intentionally, I just have a rough time sticking to descriptions of characters for some reason. But because it's my visualization, I do feel like it's easier for me to remember who that person is and give them a face at least. I also attach a voice to them after giving them a face. Not that I do voices in my head while I read, but it helps remember who they are based on what they would sound like. Do I end up with a lot of wrong visualizations, stereotypes and characters based on something I've seen already? Yeah, but as long as I get the name right, it's not going to confuse anybody. I find it easier to visualize scenes and characters from books when I am listening to it as an audio book, as long as I'm not doing something else while listening. I think it's because the audiobook is relatively slow, so my brain has more time to wander to those things, whereas with reading it's much faster, and my brain leaps ahead to each new word without fully taking the time to create a visualization. Maybe experiment with audio books, or just try slowing down or pausing every so often in your reading to create some mental images. Edit. Oops. I just realized my comment is probably not going to be useful to you since you only have issues with faces, but I'll leave it here anyway in case anyone else has trouble visualizing in general. Same. This is why I watch the movie first, then read the book. I cannot produce images in my head. There you have it. What to do when you struggle at visualizing book characters. Thank you for watching till the end. Before you leave, do me a huge favor and remember to subscribe to I Love Reading if you have not already. Lastly, press the bell icon to get notified immediately I release new content. See you on the next video.